U.S. military before there was a Fort Jackson. And today Fort Jackson represents 20,000 jobs in the Midlands area and a $2 billion a year economy. But let's go back in history a little bit. Most of you know that the Civil War ended in 65? Yeah. And so this is 151 years ago. But most people are not aware that the Federal Army remained in Colombia for another 12 years. Essentially, South Carolina was an occupied country for 12 years. And what happens then is in 1877, the federal troops left South Carolina. And so now let's go from 1877 to 1898, when the Spanish-American War broke out. When the Spanish-American War broke out in 1898, the U.S. Army established 5 temporary camps in Columbia, South Carolina. One of them was located they're all now city parks, those areas. If you know where Hyatt Park is in North Columbia was one, Elmwood Park was another one, Earlwood Park was another one, Lynch Park, which is just off Elmwood, and the other one was down in 5 Points where the Martin Luther King Park is today. All 5 of those temporary Army camps are today city parks. And the reason they were located where they were is because you had to have a source of water. Because remember, in 1898, there were no trucks or cars. There were horses only. And you got to also remember now that these 5 camps, 2 of them were near Columbia College. And what's at Columbia College but young ladies? And there's pictures in the history books of these young ladies from Columbia College dating essentially federal troops, riding these big bicycles with a big wheel you may have seen pictures of. Anyway, this whole situation went so well that when World War I broke out, the Army decided to take another look at the Columbia area to see if possibly we should establish a camp here. And so a major by the name of Douglas MacArthur, who later went on to be a 5-star Army general in World War II, came down here. He was an engineering officer, and he surveyed the land where today is Fort Jackson. That was in 1914. And he recommended if the U.S. got into World War I, that they should build a camp here. The Chamber of Commerce raised about $25,000, and so what is today Fort Jackson was originally established as Camp Jackson. And to give you some idea of how the numbers go, you all have seen the movie, drawing a blank, Gone with the Wind. Do you realize Atlanta was only 10,000 people when that movie was made? Columbia was only 6,000 people when the Civil War occurred. And now by 1898, it had reached about 15,000. So anyway, MacArthur recommended they build a camp here, and when the U.S. entered World War I in 1917, they established what was called Camp Jackson. And the original Camp Jackson of World War I, essentially, they were frame buildings with tar paper as siding. There was no wooden sides to them, it was just tar paper. The other thing that's also interesting, in World War I, the flu epidemic broke out worldwide. And there was almost 20 million people that died worldwide from the flu. And in the U.S. it was several million. And at one time out here at Camp Jackson in 1918, they had over 2,000 soldiers that were suffering from the flu. Anyway, World War I ends and Camp Jackson is closed. And it's turned over to the state of South Carolina, and a gentleman by the name of Jim Dozier, had been a lieutenant in World War I, and he then was kind of a caretaker. And if you go out to Fort Jackson Bay, there's a building called the Dozier House. And he lived in that and looked over the reservation, and from about 1922 to 1940, the Camp Jackson area was simply used for summer training. And so, of course, now along comes World War II. And in World War II, at the start, the whole U.S. Army was only about 180,000 men. And we ended up with 6 million. So you can imagine the expansion. When they built the new Camp Jackson for World War II, at any given day, there was about 10,000 workmen working out here to build it that fast. And during World War II, and that was the time also when Troncos established their restaurant right across from the bus station, because so many of the soldiers, of course, were from the northern states. And in the South, prior to World War II, their idea of pasta was Chef Boyardee. When I married my wife, I said, want to eat some real pasta? She said, oh no, I grew up on Chef Boyardee, no way. But anyway, World War II was interesting. Most people are not aware that Fort Jackson extended from Percival Road north to Two Notch Road, east of Decker Boulevard. Decker Boulevard, Percival Road, Two Notch Road. All that area was called North Fort. And it went all the way out to 601. And then the area south of Leesburg Road to the Sumter Highway, that was also a maneuver area. So during World War II, at any given time, there was about 40,000 troops on Fort Jackson, but the population of Columbia was only 30,000. So obviously the city was basically overwhelmed. Anyway, also in 1942, Winston Churchill made a visit to Fort Jackson, and you've got to remember that the English were fighting the Germans beginning in '39, so for almost 2 years they had been at war. And Winston Churchill felt that the Americans could never really, in a short time, raise a large army worthy of fighting the Germans. So in 1942, he came here to Fort Jackson, and what is today Hilton Field, they put on a demonstration for him, which was an airborne parachute drop, and he inspected one of the divisions that was here, and he partially was convinced, not totally. And the reason was because prior to World War II, our army was so small, they never had maneuvered. And you got to consider in World War II, an army division was 10,000 men, a corps was 60,000. You know, these were just huge numbers. And somehow, so also during the World War II period, the area that is now Rockbridge today in Columbia, there was a German POW camp there. And from there, the German POWs that we had captured in North Africa and other areas worked on the various farms around South Carolina. And there was no problem. Also, the Forest Lake Dam that you see today, Forest Lake Country Club, that was built by Army engineers to provide a water supply for Fort Jackson. And during that last October flood, that was one of the few dams that didn't break. And so the war ended, of course, in 1945, and what was happening then, the Army, of course, reduced from 6 million down to about 500,000. And in the spring of 1950, they were getting ready to close what was then called Fort Jackson, and the Korean War breaks out. And so when the Korean War broke out in June of '50, they essentially, Fort Jackson at that time, it was down to maybe 100 men that were caretakers. They quickly, of course, opened it up. And the other thing that happened during the Korean War started, as you know, in World War II, the Army had been segregated. We had African Americans in the Army, but they were in separate units. And what was happening when the Korean War started, that as these people were drafted for Korea, black soldiers were going to be trained in one company and whites in another. Well, the problem was that they never knew how many you were going to get at any given week. You know, you might get only 30 black soldiers, draftees, and you might get 100 whites. So the commanding general of Fort Jackson on his own decided that the next 200 guys that come in, whatever their color is, they're going to form a unit and they're going into training. And that was done essentially with no official permission. They just did it. And so that was Korea. And at that time, basic training was 16 weeks. And like today out there, it's 10 weeks. Back then, there was 16 weeks. You had about 8 weeks of what we call basic training, and another 8 weeks essentially was infantry training. And a lot of people don't understand today, you know, they tell you basic training goes on at Fort Jackson. What is basic training? Basic training essentially is survival training. It teaches these young people how to survive on the battlefield. There's heavy emphasis on rifle marksmanship, heavy emphasis on physical training, some first aid, battlefield, what we call battlefield medicine. Now, when they finish their 10 weeks of basic training at Fort Jackson, they then go on to whatever is their specialty training. So these young soldiers you see at Fort Jackson are all destined not for the combat arms. They go into things like administration, supply, logistics. They don't go into the infantry. They don't go into tanks, armor. They don't go into special forces or anything like that. And the reason I bring that up is that one day one of my Navy buddies said, I see these 5-foot young ladies out here in basic training and weigh 100 pounds. He said, my God, how are they ever going to do in combat? I said, they're not. They're not being trained for combat specialties. And so that's why you have to understand that. And then when I came here during the Vietnam War, on any given day we had about 18,000 trainees on the post. And at that time, we also, besides basic training, we were conducting advanced individual training for infantry. And some of those young soldiers would take 8 weeks of basic training on Tank Hill, and then go across the post and get 8 weeks of infantry training, and then they were sent to Vietnam. So within four months when they were drafted, they were in combat. And so that time also, the Columbia area had reached about 80,000 during the Vietnam War period. Today, the Columbia area is about 800,000, the metropolitan area. Also during that time, most some of you not old enough here to remember, but Columbia was dry. You could not get a mixed drink anywhere. You did what we call brown bags. You had to take a brown bag with your bottle of whiskey or vodka or whatever, take it into a restaurant. You had to put it under the table, and then you had to order a Coke or 7-Up, and they used to charge you about $5 for a Coke or 7-Up, which was really a racket. And so at that time, the Fort Jackson Officers Club was really the social center of Columbia, because they could pour whiskey by the 1-ounce drinks. And there was a band there every Wednesday and Friday night, and every Saturday there was a full-scale 12-piece orchestra. So we really had a lock on the business. And then, of course, by 1974, the mini bottle came in, if you can remember. We finally got rid of that, and now they pour it on a drink. What's out there today I wanted to bring that to your attention too. You have the basic training center, trains basics. We train here 50% of the Army's basic trainees, 50%. The other 50% are trained at Fort Benning, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, or Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Those are the people that are going into what we call the combat arms. We also train about 65% of all females that come into the Army. Besides the basic training center we have out here, Jackson, the Armed Forces Chaplain Center, that includes Army, Navy, Air Force. The 3 chaplain schools are located. The Navy trains chaplains for the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps does not have a separate system. We have them, what's also called on Tank Hill, the Soldier Support Institute. And what that is, they have essentially what they call the Adjutant General School, but that really trains people for administrative specialties. We have a finance school there. They also have what they call a non-commissioned officer academy, which trains sergeants for those special schools. We have also a 2-star Army Reserve Command at Fort Jackson that provides support for all the Army Reserve units in the southeast United States. We have an Armed Forces entrance station. As you come in off Jackson Boulevard, that Armed Forces entrance station, everybody that goes into the military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, doesn't matter, goes through an entrance station. That's where they get their physicals, that's where they get all their tests done, and then they go to their separate services. So that's quite an operation. We train also, well, let's call them lie detector specialists. It's a polygraph school. That school on Fort Jackson on Tank Hill trains lie detector operators for the FBI, for every branch of the federal government. They stay here about 8 or 10 weeks, depending on their course. Fort Jackson today is about 52,000 acres, and it has 900 sets of family quarters. 900 families live on Fort Jackson. And, when I was here in the early 70s, we built all new buildings, and today they're tearing all those down. And you can go around the installation, and I told the general once, well, you guys are tearing down what we built. So things seem to have a life cycle of about 40 years. Also of interest to you is that at Fort Jackson, we've had 3 commanding generals of Italian-American heritage. Tony Costello, her dad was here, 1956 to 58. General Costello had a distinguished career during World War II. He was an assistant division commander in Europe. He was a regimental commander. And besides Fort Jackson, he had a lot of tours in the Panama Canal area. The second general of Italian-American heritage was General Charles D'Orso. General D'Orso was here from 61 to 64. He was born in Italy and came here as a youngster, about 3 years of age, and later on graduated from West Point. During World War II, he served in the Italian campaign, North Africa, and also served in the Korean War. And the third one was General Mike Milano, who was here from 2010 to 2012. And Mike had a career in the Gulf area and retired in 2012. The events planned now for the 100th anniversary is starting next June, from June 2 to June 2nd, for a week. They will have kind of a Fort Jackson 100th anniversary week. And best estimates we can come up with, there's about 5 million men and women that have trained at Fort Jackson since probably the 1940s. So they're hoping to see some of those people come here for the 100th anniversary. The birthday week will be from June 2nd to June 10th. They have invited the owner and chief of staff to be here. We don't know yet whether they will be here or not. Where the old post headquarters was, as many of you may remember, has been demolished. And having been in that building, when they demolished it, I said, well, where did all the termites go that were holding hands to keep the building up? Because the building had been built in 1940, and it literally was way beyond repair. And the area where the post headquarters was, they're going to build an amphitheater. And in the amphitheater, they're going to keep the flagpole there, the big flagpole. And they're going to sell bricks like Carolina. You can buy a brick in memory of someone, whatever, and that will be announced later in the year. And anyway, the 100th anniversary is going to be kicked off with a Army birthday ball at the downtown convention center. The cost of attendance is $75 per person. It's kind of pricey, but that helps pay for the soldiers that attend that can't quite afford that. So, and also a lot of businesses in town are supporting that. Now, what I've got over here is a map of Columbia, and it shows where these 5 temporary camps were located, if you want to take a look at it. It's interesting, that situation went so well that we now have Fort Jackson Bay. Had that not gone well, there wouldn't be a Fort Jackson. So we have to thank the young ladies of Columbia College. Okay, that's all I have. If you have questions, I'll be glad to entertain them separately, because I know one person's question that others don't care about. But I thank you very much, and I hope I've enlightened you.